नहीं absorption हो गया I don't know.
नहीं आपने ये नोट्स देने के बाद फिर आपने हमारे पास थोड़ा सा
So now today we are going to start with take out your books fast. Take out your books fast. So today now the first. हाँ क्या हुआ और क्या बाकी है हो गया ना तो बुक्स निकालो 2 बार बोल चुकी मैं. So we are already completed with the concept of nutrition. Please पढ़ो because I may ask it. I may now that we are going to have a 3 hours lecture, definitely in this 3 hours, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm going to take a revision because next in the month of June, when again 1 hour lecture would start, that time taking revision is difficult. So now that you are here for 3 hours, I would take revision and remember the pace would be a little bit faster. So be very attentive, try to follow because in this month of May, this entire chapter has to be done and it's a very long chapter. The processes, it's a very long chapter. So we try to finish this chapter this month so that it's easier. When in the month of June, when the exams are on, some school will have the first 2 parts, some school will have the first part. So there's no worry, your portion is already done, the first chapter. And you have to read this chapter a number of times. बहुत कुछ है इस chapter में 4 major segments है इस chapter में. So you have to read. So now, when we are talking about the concept of nutrition, absorption, assimilation, definitions, I think we wrote no definitions here. Definitions we wrote over. No. The entire story of nutrition. Now, if I have to summarize, what would be the 5 major steps? What would be the 5 major steps of nutrition? The first one is ingestion. The second is digestion. The third is absorption. The fourth is assimilation, and the fifth is ingestion. So, what are these terms? Ingestion, the 5 basic steps, the 5 basic steps of nutrition. Number 1, ingestion. What is ingestion? Taking in of the food. I started the chapter with this concept at the start, the first lecture, where I said the method of taking food for a bird and human and for an insect and a fish are all different. Ingestion. Based on what type of mouth parts we have, the process of ingestion will vary. After that, what digestion? Again, based on what type of structures we have inside our body, holozoic nutrition we are majorly talking about. The process of digestion, how, in what different efficiency the process has to happen, that will very much depend on what type of system we have inside the body. Third is what? Absorption. Now that the digestion is over, what are the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion, fat and protein digestion? You'll have to know. What are the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion? I'm not asking you straight away because last class only I finished, but please go through next class, I can give you a short test. Simplest form of carbohydrate digestion? नहीं. Simplest form of carbohydrate digestion, glucose. मतलब carbohydrate digest होके simplest form क्या बनता है? The small intestine glucose. Proteins? Amino acids. And fats? Fatty acids and glycerol. Don't write anything. Fatty acids and glycerol. The last steps that we have talked about in the intestine, the fatty acids and glycerol can be absorbed. Amino acids can be absorbed. Can peptides be absorbed? No, because they are not the simplest form. So amino acids, if you remember the last day with the diagram of the villi, I explained you also that after the process of digestion is over, all these molecules which are outside the villi, in the cavity of the small intestine, the ileum. Now what will happen? These molecules will enter through the wall of the villi and fall into the blood vessel. Why they would enter through the wall of the villi? Because the wall of the villi is very thin. And just next to the wall, there are large number of blood vessels. So that is what was the concept of absorption, just again for remembrance. So if I talk about that, these blood vessels, they would generally run like this. And then if I have to understand what is the concept of absorption, the concept of absorption is something like this, that all these molecules which are in different types, 3 major types we understand, they would cross the wall and enter into the blood vessel, and the blood vessel is now loaded with all these different type of molecules. Which molecules am I talking about now that the blood is loaded with? Amino acids and glucose and fatty acids and glycerol. And now that the blood vessel is carrying all these substances way to the body cells and the tissues, what is this process known as assimilation? So what is assimilation? The transfer, the process of transporting of the different type of nutrients by the way of the blood vessel is assimilation. And the last, what is back happening in the large intestine? In the large intestine, back is reabsorption of water, formation of the feces, and release of the waste substances. That is what is called ingestion. Earlier, whenever you were talking about in the earlier standards, always you had understood a specific word, excretion. Excretion definitely talking about the release of the waste substances. Abhi, there's a big difference between the word excretion and ingestion. If I talk about the release of waste substances by the way of the large intestine, ye excretion nahi, that is ingestion. And if I talk about the release of the waste substances by the way of the kidneys, that is actually excretion. Okay. So what is ingestion and what is excretion? Is the definition the same? No, the definition is not the same. Now, in the higher standards, as you understand, the concept has to be a little bit more specific. So we will just wind up this part of the chapter with those last 4 definitions. 5 definitions right out. The phases of nutrition. What are the phases of nutrition? Number 1, ingestion. What are the phases of nutrition we are talking about? The phases of nutrition there. The phases of nutrition. So what are the phases? The first one, write down ingestion. Write down the definition, ingestion. The process of ingestion, the process of taking in, the process of taking in, process of taking in of the foodstuffs, process of taking in of the foodstuffs, into the mouth or buccal cavity, into the mouth or buccal cavity is known as ingestion, is known as ingestion. Number 2, digestion. Number 2, digestion. For digestion, some chemical substances are required. What are they called? Hydrochloric acid. No, commonly what are they called? Chemical enzymes. Enzymes. Chemicals which help in digestion, enzymes. So whenever you are writing, no, enzymes. Enzymes. So digestion का definition जब भी लिखना है, the word enzyme should be written. देखो, digestion, the breakdown of complex food substances. Breakdown of complex food substances into simpler forms. Breakdown of complex food substances into simpler forms with the help of enzymes. Breakdown of complex food substances into simpler forms with the help of enzymes is known as digestion. Is known as digestion. Third, assimilation. Third, assimilation. Third, assimilation. The distribution of I'm sorry. Absorption we did not write. Digestion. Number 3, absorption. अच्छा कोई बात नहीं, अगर assimilation लिखा भी है so not a problem. You know the sequence. अगर assimilation लिख लिया है so you can write. या तो
you can just say
absorption. The word did not come to an end, my darling. कुछ problem नहीं लिखो. Absorption. The diffusion simplest form of diffusion of simplest form of digestion, diffusion of simplest form of digestion of nutrients, that is diffusion of simplest form of digestion of nutrients, that is glucose, amino acids, diffusion of simplest form of digestion of nutrients, that is glucose, amino acids, comma fatty acids and glycerol, fatty acids and glycerol from the cavity of the small intestine, from the cavity of the small intestine to the bloodstream, of the villi, to the bloodstream of the villi is known as absorption. Is known as absorption. Number 4, assimilation. Number 4, assimilation. Definition: assimilation, the distribution of the absorbable nutrients, distribution of the absorbable nutrients, meaning glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, distribution of absorbable nutrients by the blood to different body tissues, is assimilation. Last, egestion. The release of undigested waste. From the large intestine. Is known as egestion. Okay. So these definitions are clear. So now that the concept of nutrition you had studied. So we had already studied all these in detail. Ingestion, what are the methods? Digestion, what are the methods? Then in detail we had studied heterotrophic nutrition, human, amoeba was a short concept. After that, absorption, what is the concept? Assimilation and egestion, just a basic definition that we will study. Now we start from the concept of absorption and assimilation. After absorption, what? Now after absorption, what? After absorption, just now you had written down assimilation. After assimilation, now I start from this, that these are the body cells and the tissues. So the nutrients in the form of glucose.
This is a villus.
This is the villus. The bloodstream that is running out from the villus will be distributing it all throughout the body. So the bloodstream is loaded with, the blood is, good morning. What time you got up in the morning? You had lectures from 9 o'clock today? 7:30. कितने बजे उठा सुबह? Other days, regular school? What time is your school? खुदा है ना? What time is your school? 8 o'clock. So एक ही तो घंटा पहले उठा. Then why are you feeling sleepy? It's red. So now that we are talking about the blood vessel, so the blood vessel is carrying all these nutrients. I talk about the glucose and the amino acids and the fatty acids. Process now the assimilation I had written down. So by the way of the bloodstream, the cells would get the nutrients. So I am talking about the body cells now. Say suppose this is a body cell magnified. What is this body cell getting? All these different type of nutrients, but majorly I talk about the glucose now. Why? Because glucose is getting deposited in all the body cells. What about the amino acids and the fatty acids? They will be deposited mainly in the liver cells because their further breakdown is mainly occurring in the liver cells. Then what about the glucose? Whenever we consume carbohydrate food, does carbohydrate food provide us with energy? Does carbohydrate food provide us with energy? Yes. So now that we try to understand the next part, that after the process of assimilation, when the body cells have already absorbed, when the body cells have already got adequate amount of glucose, then what is the fate of the glucose in the body cells? This glucose will also require oxygen. So the body cells should have these two components. One is the glucose, by the way of assimilation the body cells get. And the second component is oxygen. How would the body cells get oxygen? By the process of breathing. So this body cells, each and every body cell that we have, has to get both these components. Glucose by the way of assimilation and oxygen by the way of breathing. Then what is the fate of glucose? This glucose will break down into carbon dioxide, water and energy. So what is this process we are talking about? This process is what is known as respiration. This process is actually what is known as respiration. Then what is the definition of respiration now? The breakdown of the food to release energy. The breakdown of the food to release energy. So far, in the earlier standards you had actually not differentiated between a concept of breathing and respiration. That was the same thing. What is breathing and what is respiration? Almost the same. That is what you had learned. But now you have to understand that no, there's a difference between the concept of breathing and respiration. Respiration is actually the breakdown of the glucose which is happening inside the body cells. So I can give other different names also to this word respiration. That is more specifically also known as cellular oxidation or cellular respiration. So we are going to learn this now. What is respiration? There is the next segment of the chapter. What is respiration? Define respiration. Then what are you going to write? Define respiration. Respiration is the biochemical process in which food is getting broken down. Which form of food are we talking about? Glucose. The glucose is getting broken down to release what? To release carbon dioxide, water and energy. So we start with the next segment of the chapter, and that is respiration. We will start with the definition. What is respiration? We start with the definition. Write down the definition. What is respiration? The biochemical process in which respiration, the biochemical process in which food is broken down. Biochemical process in which food is broken down to release carbon dioxide, water and energy. Carbon dioxide, water and energy. Okay. So that is the standard definition that you write. Does this process require enzymes? Yes, absolutely. A whole lot of enzymes for this process also. But definitely the enzymes are absolutely different from what the digestive enzymes we had come across. The enzymes here are absolutely different. To understand the concept of respiration, here we will have to understand that we start with the concept of glucose. This glucose that we are talking about is a 6-carbon sugar. Yes, you know, when we are talking about the formula for glucose, what do we write? C6H12O6. So I would write this is a 6-carbon sugar. This is a 6-carbon sugar. So now when we are talking about this 6-carbon sugar has to get broken down. So I start with glucose. What is the fate of the glucose there in the body cells? This glucose will get broken down to a compound. And what is this compound known as? This is a simpler compound that we understand. This compound is known as pyruvate, also known as pyruvic acid. Pyruvate, also known as pyruvic acid. But this pyruvic acid is a C3 compound. It's a 3-carbon compound actually. So I'm talking about a 6-carbon compound getting broken down to definitely 2,6 C3 compound. So 3-carbon compound, if I'm talking about, definitely 3-carbon compound will combine to form one 6-carbon compound. So that is the basic concept to understand. So what is this process known as, where the glucose is getting broken down to a C3 compound, pyruvate or pyruvic acid? This process is known as glycolysis. This process is known as glycolysis or glycolysis. Where does this process take place? This process takes place in the cytoplasm of all cells. Meaning, all cells meaning, why am I talking about this all cells? Why emphasizing on this word all cells? Because when I talk about glucose getting broken down to pyruvate, it is happening in our body cells also, plants also, in the cockroaches also, in the snail also, in the fish also, in the bacteria also, in the yeast also. Any cell you name, this process is happening. Any cell you name, this process is happening irrespective of whether the cell is complex or simple. Irrespective of whether the organism is single-celled or multicellular. Nothing. We don't have to judge any feature of the organism. This process is definitely happening in all organisms because every organism has some or the other form of carbohydrate in their cells. And most commonly glucose. So that's the reason we are starting the equation with glucose. So we say glucose getting broken down in the cytoplasm of all cells. What is this process known as? Glycolysis. Glyco, sugar, lysis, breakdown. So when we are talking about glycolysis, it is the process of glucose breakdown. In the flowchart, you will not write this way. This definition that I write, you write separately. For this flowchart, you keep almost half of the page, because it's quite long given. Those of you have started in the middle of the page, you start from the margin. So what is the definition of glycolysis? Glycolysis means breakdown of glucose. This is the process of breakdown of glucose with the help of enzymes. Glucose breakdown with the help of enzymes. What is this? Glycolysis. Again, what is the location of glycolysis? Cytoplasm. Glycolysis means what? Breakdown of glucose to pyruvic acid. That is the standard definition. So I would write breakdown of glucose to what? Breakdown of glucose to pyruvate or pyruvic acid. That is the 1 mark definition you write. Define glycolysis. What to write? Breakdown of glucose to pyruvate with the help of enzymes. Now, this pyruvate, what will be the fate of the pyruvate in the cells? That will be variable. Depending on what? Depending on the condition of the cell, the type of the organism. But pyruvate har ek cell ke andar hai. Pyruvate is there in every cell. But this pyruvate will further get broken down to what? That will decide. That will be based on what type of cell, what type of organism. Now, what type of cell meaning? What type of cell meaning? Major criteria ये है कि is the cell having large number of mitochondria? तब product कुछ और है. Mitochondria नहीं है, the cell is not getting adequate oxygen, then the product is something else. So, सबसे important criteria which decides that what will be the further step for pyruvate breakdown, major criteria is oxygen there or not, mitochondria there or not. ये सबसे important feature है. So now, based on that, the process of pyruvate breakdown will again have certain steps. Let us talk about this. The first step that we talk about would be type of cells which has got abundance of oxygen. Type of cells which have got abundance of oxygen. The type of cells which are able to take in so much of oxygen from the environment. Something like us. Something like the plants, something like the fishes, something like the reptiles, something like the birds. We are in an environment which has got so much of oxygen. Are we able to take that oxygen? We are in an environment where there is so much of free oxygen. Are we able to take in that oxygen inside our body? Yes. Why? Because we have got developed structures. What is his name? Ayush, go wash your face. You are not listening to anything. So ये जो 3 घंटा whatever I am going to speak, absolute loss होगा तुम्हारे. Go wash your face. पहले दिन में ये हाल होगा तो how will you pull on? हाँ? This is the first day. How do you all feel? अच्छा ना? अच्छा लग रहा है ना? हाँ? नहीं, कल मेरा गाना नहीं है. मेरा गाना हर एक मंडे को सुनना है. कल कौन सा सब्जेक्ट है? So timetable you got, no? Why are you asking me? You got the timetable, no?
Yes.
So we every day how many days? हाँ?
Every Monday.
हाँ, तो कल क्या है? How many days a week you have got class?
Every Saturday, except Sunday.
Except for Saturday. Saturday भी है class? Saturday में कौन सा subject है? 3 घंटा. Only 3 hours. एक subject का 3 hours होगा.
6 hours.
So she say only English. अच्छा लग रहा है ना? हाँ? उसे बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है. Lecture starting 7:30 से so nice. 7:30 से पढ़ाई कर लो. By the time 2:30 you are free. घर जाओ. After that what do you do? Sleep. Sleep मतलब तब 4 घंटा नहीं सोना है. 1 hour. Go out play. फिर शाम को आके फिर से 2 घंटा पढ़ाई करो. What is she saying? थोड़ी ना हम लोग ऐसे करने वाले. 10th standard थोड़ा सा serious बनो पहले से, so there is no stress. I always keep on telling you this. Okay, back to this topic. What are we discussing? We are discussing glycolysis. What is glycolysis? I told you, breakdown of glucose. Where is this process happening? Inside the cells. This is not happening in the intestine or in the body organs. No, in the cells. Every cell के अंदर ये process हो रहा है. So that's why I wrote in the cytoplasm of all cells. This process known as glycolysis. I said this process will happen in all organisms. This will happen in the cytoplasm of all cells. ये याद रखना है, all cells. Now we talk about that this pyruvate, what will be the fate of the pyruvate based on what the conditions are. First, this pyruvate, if it is present in a cell where there is enough oxygen, for example, our cells. For example, the bird, for example, the other different type of vertebrates. Just now I was asking you that we have so much of oxygen surrounding us. Are we able to take that oxygen? Yes. Why are we able to take that oxygen? Because we have got developed respiratory organs. Is an insect able to take that oxygen? Yes. Insects also have developed respiratory structures. Is a plant able to take that oxygen? Yes. All these aquatic organisms, are they able to take the oxygen? Yes. So that means all these organisms will show this process. All these organisms will show this process. So एक तो है abundance of oxygen. Apart from that, we also have to remember that are these organisms having a large number of mitochondria? Presence of mitochondria also is important. So what are the two requisites for a organism to show this pathway? What would be the products? The products would be carbon dioxide plus water plus 38 molecules of ATP. What is ATP? Adenosine triphosphate. We had already studied in the 9th standard. So when will the products be carbon dioxide, water and 38 ATP? Only when the cell has large amount of oxygen, the cell has large numbers of mitochondria. What was the job of mitochondria in a cell? Energy. So that's why we are saying When will the product be carbon dioxide, water and ATP? Only when the cell has large number of mitochondria. So what is this process known as? This process is known as the Krebs cycle. What is Krebs cycle? Pyruvate getting broken down to carbon dioxide, water and energy. Where is Krebs cycle happening? In the mitochondria. सिर्फ ये नाम ही याद रखना है, steps नहीं है. So I said I use two words now. One is glycolysis. Then how will you define glycolysis? Breakdown of glucose to pyruvate. What is Krebs cycle? Breakdown of pyruvate to carbon dioxide, water and ATP. This is Krebs cycle. Where does Krebs cycle take place? Mitochondria. Okay. Now we talk about just the opposite of this. The opposite, the third step. I'll go to the second later. I talk about just the opposite of this type of a situation, where the glucose is present in a cell, but that cell has complete absence of oxygen. The cell has complete absence of oxygen. Can we think of any organism where any organism which does not have any respiratory structures, but they are very much present? Yeast and amoeba. No, amoeba can show diffusion. Amoeba can take in oxygen by the process of diffusion. So if I talk about a large number of bacteria, I talk about a large number of bacteria which is along with us. Say suppose right now I may understand surrounding our body there are hundreds and hundreds of bacteria surrounding our hand and face, and there are hundreds of bacteria, but our body can take in, our body cells can take in oxygen. They have got the nostrils and all the respiratory parts well developed. But what about the bacteria surrounding us? No, the bacteria doesn't have any such structure to take in oxygen. So what will happen? The bacteria comes in this category. So what examples are we supposed to write here? I would write examples like the bacteria. I would write examples like the yeast. So the yeast and variety of different type of bacteria are in the soil, in the water and in the air. They have no methods for taking in oxygen inside their cells. So what would be the fate of the pyruvate? The pyruvate will follow this pathway, where this pyruvate gets broken down to ethyl alcohol. Pyruvate gets broken down to ethyl alcohol. It's a type of a type of an alcohol that is getting formed. Ethyl alcohol, when we say ethyl alcohol, means we are talking about a specific proportion of water, specific proportion of alcohol. So ethyl alcohol, and along with ethyl alcohol there is water and two molecules of ATP. So that is the component. So now if the pyruvate if the pyruvate is in a type of a cell where there is absolute absence of oxygen, then what would be the fate of the pyruvate? Then the pyruvate will get broken down to ethyl alcohol, water and two molecules of ATP. Now take a note here, we talk about a major difference. If the cell has oxygen, is the release of energy more? If the cell has absence of oxygen, is the release of ATP much lesser? Yes. The release of ATP is much lesser. We are talking about absence. And these type of organisms, the yeast and the bacteria, they can manage with that small amount of energy because their body functions are so simple. Their body functions are so simple in comparison to us. Now that you are writing, I am talking, so much of energy is used up. So the energy demand for complex organisms like us is so much. Talk about a fish, talk about a bird, the energy requirement is so much in comparison to a yeast, in comparison to a bacteria. What is this method of glucose breakdown known as? This method of glucose breakdown is known as aerobic respiration, meaning complete breakdown of glucose. If there is complete breakdown of glucose, then only the energy release is much more for one molecule of glucose. And now that I talk about this method, what is this method known as? This is known as anaerobic respiration. What is the meaning of anaerobic respiration? Incomplete breakdown of glucose. So here I am talking about incomplete breakdown of glucose. This is incomplete breakdown of glucose that we understand. And if I talk about aerobic, what is the contrast you are supposed to write? Complete breakdown of glucose. So now, when we are comparing the concept of aerobic and anaerobic respiration, I would say what is the basic concept of aerobic respiration? Complete glucose breakdown. This is complete glucose breakdown. Anaerobic respiration, incomplete glucose breakdown. Are you writing down all these points? Constantly I am seeing both of you. You'll be in another 1 minute, you'll be out of the class. दोनों को सीधा बाहर करूंगी. Whenever I am saying a joke, don't take it that ma'am is in that mood all throughout 3 hours. मैं क्लास में 1 ही मिनट जोक करती हूँ या तो 2 minutes. That the rest has to be all serious. You are not serious in the class, you have to be out of my class. क्लास के अंदर 3 घंटा बैठोगे, 6 घंटा बैठोगे. After that, when I ask you something, you are not in a position to answer. This type of students I don't allow sitting in the class. Please make it very sure. Okay, so now when I talk about the concept of aerobic and anaerobic respiration, what I told you, how do we understand that glucose is completely broken down? Because 1 molecule of glucose giving rise to 38 molecules of ATP. The energy release is so much. Okay, so we'll talk about some more differences also. Now looking into these two equations, tell me at least 3 differences. What is the first difference? First difference, aerobic respiration, energy release is more. 38 and 2. What is the second difference?
There's complete breakdown of glucose.
हाँ. अच्छा. अब जब difference लिखोगे, how will you write down the difference? First है, whether this process requires oxygen or not, that has to be written as the first difference. Second difference क्या लिखोगे? Products. Complete products लिखना है as the second difference. Third difference क्या लिखोगे? Based on the energy. How much is the energy released? 1 molecule of glucose breaks down to release 38 molecules of ATP, and here contrast 2 molecules of ATP. So remember the 3 differences. Now I'm just asking you to write down the flow chart. Maybe the next class. Examples are generally not considered as a difference. Examples, if asked in the question, you are writing. But examples, तुम ऐसे ही simply जो examples लिखोगे, that will be not marked as a point. That's not a point of difference ever. So what type of examples should we write here? We can write examples of the birds and the human and the plants, etc. All these come under aerobic respiration. Let us talk about an intermediate pathway. Now, what is the second step? The second step here, I would understand that it is not actually an intermediate pathway, but that is a temporary phase. That is not a permanent, constant phases like this. I talk about in human, this is the only process which is always happening, and in the East, this is the only process which is always happening. But in certain cases, I may talk about, in our case, let us talk about ourselves only. I talk about, in our case, can there be a situation when there is lack of oxygen in our body cells? हो सकता है? कब? Vigorous muscular activity. Whenever we do vigorous muscular activity, at that time, what would happen? You are running, you are working very fast, you are writing very fast. Let's suppose, simple example, you are writing very fast in an exam. Does your finger muscles, hand muscles starts aching? Yes, it aches. You are running, you want to finish up the line, and then is it possible that an athlete can suffer from a fatigue and a cramp or a twitch? Yes. So why does that happen? Lack of oxygen develops. Now, why does the lack of oxygen develop? Because the muscle contraction is much faster than the breathing rate. So what is the first symptom? Whenever you are writing fast, did you ever notice that your breathing rate is little bit increasing? Whenever you are running, breathing rate is little bit increasing, and that is very, very easily understood. Whenever you are running, the breathing rate starts speeding up. You are cycling, breathing rate speeds up. Whenever we are walking fast, also the breathing rate speeds up. Why? What does the breathing rate starts increasing? Because muscle contraction and rate of breathing far नहीं है. At that time, muscle contraction faster हो गया and breathing कम हो गया, but the body needs oxygen. So to take more oxygen, the breathing rate starts increasing. So why did we have experience? Every now and then we experience the moment we speed up muscular activity, breathing rate increases. Why does that happen? To put in or get in more and more of oxygen into our blood, into our body cells. No? So now for this type of a situation when sometimes there's a lack of oxygen, then what would the products be? The products would be lactic acid and 2 molecules of water and 2 molecules of ATP. But I said this process, this is a temporary phase. This is a temporary phase. Don't write all these things when you are writing down the full flow chart. Now, this is a temporary phase. Then what will happen? An athlete is running for the last 25 minutes, and that athlete just near the finishing line suffers from a fatigue. Is it possible that athlete revives on his own after 5 minutes of rest? Yes. So what has happened in the 5 minutes of rest? The muscle contraction and the oxygen intake has become more or less at par. So now the process of breakdown of glucose has again become like this. So this accumulation of lactic acid can be revived back, and this step can again get converted to this when the oxygen intake has become normal. When can the oxygen intake become normal? 5 minutes of rest, 3 to 5 minutes of rest, the body will come back to normal. So lactic acid, when does this happen? Example, what to write? We would write examples of skeletal muscles, one of the best examples always to write down. Skeletal muscles, one of the best examples where we get to see this pathway happening. And if there is accumulation of lactic acid, what does it give rise to? This gives rise to muscular cramps. Excessive accumulation of lactic acid leads to muscular cramps. Also, a condition known as muscle fatigue. Fatigue means tiredness. Now, fatigue and cramps are two different things. Cramps meaning you are writing and your muscles are paining. That is fatigue. You're walking, your feet muscles, leg muscles paining. That is fatigue. Why does it pain? Fatigue. Oxygen less, contraction faster. But cramps means there's a contracted muscle because no oxygen absolutely now, and it is already contracted. It's not relaxing and you cannot walk further. That is cramps. Cramps is a more higher stage when deficiency of oxygen has built up. When oxygen deficiency is bit lesser, fatigue, more cramps. Understood? So these are the three pathways. You get this question as it is in your exam. Write the three pathways of glucose breakdown for 2 marks, 3 marks. Write the three pathways. Now, for the three pathways, you have to write down this entire flowchart and explain with the proper introduction and explain the steps properly. So, the first is glycolysis we have come across, Krebs cycle we have come across. What is the major reason why muscular cramps happen? You have to write about lactic acid. You have to write about the deficiency conditions. Can this condition be revived? What is your answer? Yes. With rest, these conditions can be revived and the oxygen intake is much more. So this different. Now, what are some of the important questions? Differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration is one of the most common questions that you get from here. And certain examples if asked. Let us write one table there. Differences. I will only give you the hint for the point and you should be able to write your differences. Now, make a table. Differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration.
There are times when where cramps are for like a long period of time.
Because when the oxygen deficiency is to that level, when the nerves are affected, then it will be for a longer time. When maybe, for an example, an athlete had been straining himself or herself, had been doing it for a long time, efficiency of oxygen is now to the brim, so less the amount of oxygen in the body is. The person may also become unconscious. The person may suffer from cramps and that may persist almost for 5, 7, 10 minutes. Because the nerves are also affected. So for the nerves to relax back, it takes a little bit longer time. Quite a number of times the contraction may be that stiff And if the body of that individual has some other ailments, that may need some medication and injection to relax the muscles. That is also possible. But under all normal conditions, we understand the person may take a period of 3, 4, 5 minutes of rest and it revives back. Okay? Unless and until the person has some other ailments in the body. Let us write down now the differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. First of all is the definition. First of all, the definition. What definition are we going to write? Definition we will talk about first. Write down the process of for aerobic. The process of for aerobic. Let us write. Basic difference. What error students write in their answer is when difference between aerobic and anaerobic is asked, they would always write this way. Presence of oxygen and absence of oxygen. That is a common error that students do. Presence of oxygen, absence of oxygen. No mark will be given for that. Presence of oxygen may, what is happening? That has to be written. Meaning, for aerobic, what are you supposed to write? Glucose is breaking down in the presence of oxygen. Glucose is breaking down in the absence. So, glucose and oxygen ka relation likhna hai. Right? The first point. So aerobic, under aerobic you will write breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen, right?
The process
Or breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen. Other side, write on your own. Process of breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen. If that is aerobic, what should you write for anaerobic?
process of breakdown of glucose in the absence of.
Very good, right? Second point, write about the products. What are the products you get to see for aerobic?
Carbon,
Carbon,
water,
carbon, carbon dioxide, water for aerobic. Check. पूरा सारे products लिखना है. Product सारा लिखना है. Carbon dioxide, water and 38 ATP. Ethyl alcohol, water and 2 ATP. You may get question in your exam, right? Differences between aerobic and anaerobic based on the products. तब सिर्फ products ही लिखना है. Definition, तब सिर्फ definition ही लिखना है. What is the question asked based on that? Products हो गया. Next number 3. Ethyl alcohol, water and 2 ATP. Anaerobic. Third difference, another difference that always you should write is comparing the energy. For aerobic you will write 1 molecule of glucose releases how many? Energy molecule 38 ATP. 1 molecule of glucose releases 38 ATP. 1 molecule of glucose releases 38 ATP. Anaerobic में क्या लिखेंगे? Anaerobic में क्या लिखना है? 1 molecule of glucose releases 2 ATP. Now, take one question you will try writing down your answer in not more than 3 to 4 lines. Take one question. Complex organisms like human show anaerobic respiration. Complex organisms like human show anaerobic respiration. Full stop. Give reason. What to write?
Complex organisms like human is facing for lack of
oxygen and shows anaerobic respiration in rats and
हाँ, इसको थोड़ा और explain करना है. When the muscle cells of human may show incomplete breakdown. Muscle cells of human may show incomplete breakdown. May show incomplete breakdown of glucose. May show incomplete breakdown of glucose when there is deficiency of oxygen. When there is deficiency of oxygen due to vigorous vigorous due to vigorous muscular activity. Due to vigorous muscular activity. Full stop. Due to vigorous muscular activity. Full stop. Pyruvate breaks down to produce. Continue. Pyruvate breaks down to produce lactic acid. Pyruvate break down to produce lactic acid and 2 molecules of ATP. Stop. Accumulation of lactic acid. Accumulation of lactic acid results in muscular cramps. Accumulation of lactic acid results in muscular cramps. Or muscle fatigue. Muscular cramps or muscle fatigue. These words, whenever you write your answer, general nahi likhna hai. These specific words you are supposed to use in your answer. Okay. So this is the first part of the chapter. So now there's a small paragraph in your text. If you read, show me the book. There's a small paragraph. Now we are talking about breakdown of glucose. We are talking about breakdown of glucose. Okay, so look into page 87. Underline the word fermentation. Underline the word fermentation. Can you see that word there? Dekha? Fermentation. Underline the word fermentation. And after that, page 88. Page 88. Take the first paragraph. That is what I have been explaining you right now. So all these you'll have to read, and after that you find out if there's anything that you are not understanding. Go to page 89 and take the last paragraph, the second paragraph above activity 5.6. Activity 5.6 के ऊपर जो paragraph है, animals have evolved different organs. So take that paragraph. Now let us discuss on this few concepts. Now what am I saying is, number one, these things already I had explained you. You'll have to read and find out. First of all, let us talk about what is fermentation. What is fermentation? Can you tell me 2 or 3 examples of fermentation that is happening in your homes also? Formation of the bread dough, etc. That is also fermentation. Or curd, idli dosa batter, that is also fermentation. No, not sugar, but when we are talking about fermentation of starch, any other item of starch, complex carbohydrate, and in the making of beverages, etc. If I talk about, so now what are some of the examples? What is the meaning of fermentation? Fermentation is whenever we allow certain type of microbes grow. Now that I talk about the curd, now that I talk about the idli and the dosa batter, we are actually allowing the useful bacteria grow in large numbers. So now that these useful bacteria grow in large numbers, small amount of certain type of alcohol is developed there, formed there. So whenever we are heating that dough now, what happens? That dough becomes fluffy. It rises up. No, why does it rise up? Because that carbon dioxide has to release. So along with this, carbon dioxide is also released, remember. So during this process, ethyl alcohol or some form of alcohol is always produced whenever we are fermenting any type of starch. That can be rice, that can be the flour. I may talk about in the making of the bread and those pizza bases and the buns. What has been done? The wheat flour has been taken and a dough has been made and keep them for at least some 5-6 hours. And after that, what is it? They are rising up. Their acid is becoming a little bit softer and spongy, and now it is ready for baking. So in all these processes, later if I talk about the fermentation of the grapes and the fermentation of the rice and the fermentation of so many other different type of food substances in making of the different type of beverages, the wine and the rum and the vodka, etc. All these are fermentation. So this process has got a great industrial importance also. We get to see fermentation in our own homes. We get to see fermentation in variety of food items that we eat. At the same time, this particular process has a great economic importance because so many different type of industrial processes run on this process, and so many different type of food items are made, so many different type of beverages are made, etc. So what is fermentation? What will you write? What is fermentation? The process of glucose breakdown in the absence of oxygen, where the pyruvate is getting broken down to ethyl alcohol, water and energy, two molecules of energy. So in the entire process of fermentation, what has been used? As just now I mentioned, at home, bacteria are involved always, and that's the reason ethyl alcohol. But if this bacteria would have had methods of taking in oxygen, तो ये process हो सकता था? No, they don't have methods of taking in oxygen, so ethyl alcohol. What is fermentation? Take one question. What is fermentation? What is fermentation? Name any two. Name any two organisms. Same question. Name any two organisms involved in this process. Involved in this process. Any two organisms involved in this process. Write down. Fermentation is the process of incomplete breakdown of glucose. Fermentation is the process of incomplete breakdown of glucose. Incomplete breakdown of glucose in the absence of oxygen. In the absence of oxygen, two. In the absence of oxygen, two. Ethyl alcohol, water, ethyl alcohol, water, carbon dioxide and ATP. Ethyl alcohol, water, carbon dioxide and ATP. Carbon dioxide is also
the chemical formula of ethyl alcohol.
C2H5OH, ethyl alcohol. Okay. Full stop. Two organisms used. What are the two organisms you can write now? Write organisms showing this process. Which are those organisms? This process is carried out in yeast and bacteria. This process commonly carried out in yeast, bacteria. This process is carried out in yeast, bacteria, etc. Next paragraph you write. This process is of great economic importance. Use process, fermentation is of great economic importance in industries. In food processing industries, importance in industries, in making various food stuffs, such as curd, batter of idli, dosa, bread, different types of beverages, etc. Curd, batter of idli, dosa, bread, different types of beverages, etc. So that is the basic concept of fermentation that you have to write down. Now, we just talk about the process of respiration and respiratory system. Now, let us start talking about the concept of respiratory system. What is the respiratory system about? Respiratory system in humans. So, we are going to study the concept of respiratory system in human. Look into this diagram. Look into this image there talking about the respiratory system in human. What are the parts? The parts of the respiratory system in human in a sequence. The first one, we talk about the nostrils, followed by the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity that we have is this particular region that we are talking about. That is the nasal cavity. Now, each of these parts, they have got their own function. So, I talk about the nostrils. The first part is always the nostrils. What is the job? Taking in of the air. Breathing, the process of breathing that we understand. Nasal cavity. What is the job of the nasal cavity? Whatever air we are breathing in, the nasal cavity, first of all, more or less adjusts the temperature. So I would say the nasal cavity warms the air, whatever we breathe in. Now see, we are in this AC room. Is this air that we are breathing in of the same body temperature? No, it is lower than our body temperature. But even if you are sitting in this room for 5-6 hours, we may not catch cold. Unless and until we are having very low immunity, that's different. But normally we will not catch cold. Why? Because every time that we are breathing, this nasal cavity is warming the air before it takes it. In. So what is the function? It makes the air that we inhale more or less as far with our body temperature, then sends it in. So our body organs does not suffer from any mucus formation, etc. And then we have got the pharynx. Can you see this? The pharynx. The pharynx is actually a common part for the food also to go through and for the inhaled air also to go through. Can you see here? The food that we take in also passes through this pharynx and then into the food pipe. The air that we inhale also passes through this pharynx and then into the windpipe. Where is the windpipe? Can we feel the windpipe? This is the windpipe. If you press a little bit your fingers, you can feel the windpipe. But where is the food pipe? Can we touch the food pipe or feel? No, because the food pipe is just at the back. It is at the back. The food pipe is just at the back of the windpipe. The windpipe we can feel. So whatever we are inhaling passes through the pharynx into the windpipe. Whatever we are eating passes through the pharynx and goes to the food pipe at the back of the windpipe. We follow with the windpipe right now. Can you see next to the pharynx is the larynx? Can you give me one more word about the larynx? Did you ever come across this word larynx? Voice box. Larynx. Where is the larynx? Larynx is this part. If you touch, you will feel a little bit hard. And if you press a little bit, you can understand there's a modulation of your voice because this is a region made up of cartilages. You remember cartilage? When I speak cartilage, can you tell me which are the points of the body, which are the regions of our body? The ear, the tip of the nose. This larynx, also known as the voice box, is made up of cartilage. What is its function? Definitely passage of the air, because right now we are talking about respiration. We want to understand the pathway of the air that we inhale. So larynx definitely allows the pathway of the air. It allows the movement of the air. But apart from the movement of the air, what else? The entire larynx, the entire windpipe has got, can you see the entire windpipe has got small ring-like structures. What are these ring-like structures? These are also made up of cartilage. So what am I saying? The larynx is made up of cartilage, and that's the reason it is a bit hard. The entire windpipe, what is the name of the windpipe? Trachea. The trachea is actually made up of smooth muscles, very soft. But since the trachea has to maintain a proper diameter every time we take in air, give out air, that's the reason the outer wall of the trachea has got the rings of cartilage. And that is what you can feel when you touch this part. It is not a smooth tube. It has got, some dents and depressions and dents and depressions it has. So those rings of cartilages are there. This trachea, what is the other word? Common name for trachea? Windpipe. Windpipe is it, and the specific biological word would be the trachea. And this trachea would divide into two right and left tubes to enter into the chest cavity. What are these tubes known as? Bronchi. Individual bronchus, bronchi. And this bronchi would divide into a large number of small tubules. In levels, they are constantly dividing. What are we to term them as? Bronchioles. And every single bronchiole terminates into a small sac-like structure. A small balloon-like structure, very fine thin membrane like the villus we had studied. And what are these fine sac-like structures known as? Alveoli. And this millions of alveoli form this entire triangular shaped structure. And what are these triangular shaped structure in a pair known as? The lungs. Lungs are the primary respiratory organ that we have, because lungs have got the millions of air sacs. And what are these air sacs called? Alveoli. So what are the parts in the sequence now? The parts in the sequence: nostrils, the nasal cavity, followed by the pharynx, the larynx and the windpipe. Now can you tell me what is the common function for the pharynx, larynx and the windpipe? Passage of air. Only that. Passage of air. The pharynx and the larynx and the windpipe, they are all doing only one function, and that is allowing the air from the nasal cavity reach the lungs. That is their job. Allowing the air from the nasal cavity reach the lungs. Here are some specific points you are supposed to know. Why the trachea has got those C-shaped cartilages or the C-shaped cartilaginous ring. Just now I told you that if I talk about why the C-shaped cartilaginous rings all over, because the smooth tube, every time you are exhaling out, if the tube made up of smooth muscles contract, the next time we inhale, we have to put in a lot of force so that the tube again widens. But does that happen? How many number of times you are breathing in, or did you breathe in the last half an hour? Did you keep a check? No, it is so spontaneous. We don't even remember how many number of times we breathe per minute. And we breathe quite a number of times per minute. So we are not even aware. Why? Because this trachea has got a specific diameter. It has got a specific diameter. How is the diameter maintained? C-shaped cartilaginous rings. What are the two narrow tubes just now mentioned? The trachea divides to form the bronchi. The bronchi divides to form bronchioles, and the bronchioles terminate into a bundle of, or into a large number of air sacs. And what are those air sacs called? Alveoli. Now here we are going to learn some major features, characteristics about this parts. Let us start. The respiratory system in human we are studying. What are some of the functions? Let us start with. The respiratory system in human. Did you ever study this earlier in the earlier standards? Respiratory system, digestive system, respiratory. Okay, digestive system reminds me. Did all of you draw the diagram of the alimentary canal? Did I mention diagram drawing? Okay. Look into the diagram that you'll have to draw. Respiration, you have already started. So, is there space? I think you all must not have kept the space. Not a problem. You do one thing. Respiration, you had started. Go to the next page. I will give you 2 questions. In this 1 week time, try to complete at least 1 diagram. Go to the next page. Write 1 question. For respiration, or at least leave 2 pages in brief. So by that, in these 2-3 pages, your respiration class notes all will be over. Then you draw the diagram. No need of drawing the diagram. All of us are in the middle now. Leave 3 pages and then take the questions for diagram. Because respiration already we have started. Leave 3 pages and write 1 question. Draw a neat, well-labeled diagram. Draw a neat, well-labeled diagram of the human digestive system. Then you can draw. Because most of them they don't have, so you can draw. So in the middle of the respiratory system notes, I did not want them to draw the diagram, so that's why. So if you have, you can draw. And that one which you have written now, you can make it for the respiratory system. Okay? So now the first question in this page, draw a neat, well-labeled diagram for the digestive system in human. Go to the next page. Ye pura page rakho. Go to the next page. Respiratory also. Draw a neat, well-labeled diagram. Draw a neat, well-labeled diagram for the respiratory system in human. You can draw the diagram from your textbook or from the volume. Now, from the textbook, especially for the digestive system, the diagram in your textbook is clear. Or the diagram that I had drawn, but the diagram that I had shown you, that is comparatively easier, but I don't want you to draw these diagrams in the class. These diagrams have got just 2 marks weightage. If it comes also in the paper, it comes for 2 marks. So either you can take a diagram from the net also, a simple, easy diagram of the alimentary canal. This diagram also you can draw. This diagram is a simpler one. You need not every time draw the outline of the human body. That's not necessary. The outline of the human body you need not draw. This type of a simple diagram you can draw for the alimentary canal. Neat, nice, only pencil and labeling all correct. And for the respiratory system also this type of a simple diagram. I want all of you to draw at least little bit more than half a page and proper labeling with pencil. Okay. So these 2 diagrams, last time I forgot to mention about the diagram of the alimentary canal. We'll just complete with 2 parts and then it's I think time for your break only. Let us talk about the parts of the respiratory system and their functions. So what are the parts in a sequence? The parts in a sequence, number 1 is the nostrils. What is the function of the nostrils? Intake of air. Intake of air. Or we talk about breathing. What is the job of the nostrils? Intake of the air. Again, what is the function of nostrils? Students would write intake of oxygen. Is that correct? Correct, eh? Write the function of nostrils. Students would write intake of oxygen. ये सही है कि गलत है? क्यों wrong? हाँ, कौन सा correct है?
मतलब ऑक्सीजन लेना हाँ है, but बहुत सारे एयर टाइप्स.
हाँ, so you cannot write intake of oxygen. हमारे nostrils में कोई filter थोड़ी है. We don't have any filter. We are taking in air. हाँ, what happened?
Purifier.
हाँ, वो purifier नहीं है ना. We don't have any purifier. So when we are talking about the nostrils, you are always supposed to write we take in air, atmospheric air we take in all. But the question is, our body can take in only oxygen from it. What about the rest of the gases? Released out. The next exhalation, release out. So हमेशा intake of air लिखना है, not to write intake of oxygen. Talk about the next one, the nasal passage. Nasal passage. What is the job of the nasal passage? It warms the inhaled air. Inhaled air becomes warm, warms the inhaled air. Third, pharynx. What is the job of the pharynx? It's a common passage. These are all the functions that you are supposed to write. Common passage for food and inhaled air. Food and inhaled air. Next is we talk about the larynx. What is larynx? It is also known as the voice box. Larynx is also known as the voice box. Does the air pass through the larynx? Yes, but apart from that, it also helps in production of the voice because of the vibration of the cartilaginous rings which are there, cartilaginous fine threads which are there. Production of voice, that is its function. Next, we talk about the trachea. One special feature of the trachea is the trachea possesses one special feature to remember. It possesses C-shaped cartilaginous rings. It possesses C-shaped cartilaginous rings. That's a specific feature always to remember with trachea, and you get questions also with this. What is the significance of the C-shaped cartilaginous rings? We will talk about this later. Function is what? The function is, let us write it together. After the trachea, we have got the bronchi. And after the bronchi, we have got the bronchioles. What is their common function? If I have to write down the function common for all the three, the function is the same. What is the function? Passage of air. Passage of the inhaled or the exhaled air. So we will write passage of air. That is the function of all these three parts, common. The trachea, the bronchi, the bronchioles. The function is the same.
Ma'am, are there any functions specifically for bronchi and bronchi?
No, only passage of air. Their function is nothing but the passage of air only, all the three. But trachea, separately you have to also remember what is the job of the C-shaped cartilaginous rings. After the bronchioles, we are supposed to start with the alveolus. We will continue with the alveolus. After the break, we are going to continue with the alveolus. पाँच मिनट का ब्रेक है ना? This is your book.
Today the lectures are